All right, we're going to stay on the subject of parole hearings in general. Our legal analyst, Jeff Hosford, is here with us to talk a little bit more about it. Jeff, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And we don't want to talk about O.J. Simpson's parole hearing specifically, but a parole hearing just in general. What is involved in a parole hearing? Does an inmate have an attorney there? How does it work?
An inmate typically doesn't have an attorney. It's a hearing involving the inmate and a board assigned usually by the governor and the Mississippi Department of Corrections. In Mississippi it would be. And then they take the information that the inmate can provide them. That's from letters from outside people, information about whether or not he'd have employment when he left jail, information about where he'd be staying, and then they also take into consideration things like the community stance and what kind of crime he committed, and if he's committed other crimes. They can go as far into things to see whether or not he was in the military and whether or not he was discharged honorably or not. They take a multitude of these things and then they decide what they believe is in the best interest of the state of Mississippi and that inmate.
So the inmate basically sits before this board. It's kind of an interview style, and you're kind of selling yourself, huh?
Yes, ma'am. You got to convince them that you've rehabilitated yourself, and in fact that's one of the qualifications or the things they consider is whether or not you've taken part in the rehabilitation process that they allow you to do in prison. The more strikes you have for you, the more likely you are to get out, and the more strikes you have against you, the more likely you are to stay in. For example, as the whole community comes out as against releasing an inmate, the likelihood of that person getting out is very low.
And finally, I'll just ask you, and I'm sure this varies from state to state, if a parole board does grant parole, is the person immediately released, or does that take, maybe a couple of more months?
Oh, I would imagine it's a processing out kind of situation. They have to go back to wherever they were housed and they process them out. I would imagine it'd be within a week or two at most usually, but it could take longer, I guess.
All right, Jeff, thanks so much. We always appreciate your perspective on these matters. If you have a question you'd like for Jeff to answer, you can send it to us at legalline@wcbi.com. Now,